question of how to develop intelligence comes up quite often. And what I find we do is very often we mistake intelligence for academic development. And parents have to look out for that. That's not always the same thing. We know that all knowledge, all new knowledge, is built on existing knowledge. And so it is with academic achievement and doing well later in life. We first have to make sure that all those basic skills are there so that we can build on them and get to more complex context and more intricate knowledge. And very important not to try and push those academic skills like letters, numbers, arithmetic, before we make sure that the initial skills are there, what everything's based on. So I'm going to go through some of the things that are important to know that build development and that build the brain. In order for us to achieve academically, to do well, we need to be able to sit still and listen. Often overlook that. So to be able to sit still in a chair, you need good core development. You need nice, big, strong muscles to keep you upright, and so you're not uncomfortable in your chair. So firstly, for children to develop intelligence, we need to actually make sure that they've got good gross motor development, that they have good core skills. We also need to make sure that both sides of the body can work together in a coordinated way, and we call that bilateral integration. So think about a simple skill like writing. Even though we might write with one hand only, the other hand is always important in stabilizing that piece of paper. The same with cutting. You might hold a pair of scissors in one hand, but you actually need the other hand to try and guide the paper as you work. So let's make sure that our children have good bilateral integration skills. And that starts initially with crawling. When your child is learning to crawl, they're using two sides of the body together. And later on, that becomes wheelbarrow races, bunny hops. So focus on those kind of things initially. Then we need good fine motor control. So the little muscles in our hands and wrists need to be strong enough to be able to do the things we need them to do. And we know that fine motor development follows on gross motor development. So when you have nice, big, strong arms or muscles in your arms, you can use the little muscles in your hands to do things. So fine motor skills are fabulous. You can do things like coloring and drawing, but I find quite often little ones, especially boys, are not so keen on that. So there are other things that you can do with your child to just practice those fine motor skills. That could be anything like shredding old newspapers, beading, playing with Play-Doh, pick-up sticks, anything where they've got to use fine controlled movement. In order to achieve academic success and to have brain development, we need to be able to concentrate, to sit still, to wait our turn. We have to have a well-developed vocabulary and to understand when the teacher gives us an instruction what that means. So along with language, we need to have a good understanding of concepts. We need to understand what different shapes look like, what different colors are like, and what time really means, and spatial positions. If the teacher says, draw a blue line above the second dot, does your child understand all of those concepts to be able to work with that instruction? Very importantly is well-developed visual and auditory perceptual skills. Your child needs to be able to see and perceive things accurately, to hear and to perceive that auditory information accurately, to be able to build the foundational skills for language and then also for reading. Children can only learn to read and write when they know shapes. You might have forgotten, but when your grade 1 teacher was teaching you to write an A, she had told you to draw a circle and then a little line next to it. The same with a capital A. You were taught to write a capital A as a triangle, but then to just move up the bottom leg. So that's essentially the important skills we need. Sequencing of letters, also very important. So be able to break a word up correctly when you don't know what it is. We need to start with those letters in a specific sequence. And sometimes those little skills are taught way before children get to school. When you are beading, when you're doing beads in a specific sequence, when you're drawing patterns, that's when those skills developed. Also very important is that we don't only read with what we see, but often with what we hear. We hear different sounds, and so things like rhymes that we essentially learn through nursery rhymes and all those little rhymes we make up when we're little, those rhymes are important because they later on teach us about word families. Words like cat, hat, sat, mat are all in the same word family because they have the same ending. Our auditory analysis skills are very important because they're going to help us to understand how to spell a word. And then also visual and auditory memory. Can you remember what you've seen? Can you remember what you've heard? So very important to make sure that all of those basic concepts are there before we start with any academic work, teaching numbers and letters. Generally, I think in order to develop intelligence, there are a few golden rules to stick to. The first with little children is to expose them to as many novel situations as you possibly can. Those could be organized activities, it could be completely spontaneous, it could be a walk in the park or going to the beach. Just as many different little things as you can. The more that they explore, the more they're going to develop an absolute love for learning. The second thing is to make sure that there's as much sensory experience as possible. Whenever you can have them touch and feel and smell and taste even, you want to encourage all those sentences. For me, reading. The more you read to your children, the better the chances are that they're going to build a good vocabulary and be able to have good academic skills later on. And then lastly, I think it's important not to provide the answers too easily. As parents, we want to help, we want to solve problems for our children, but try not to do that. See if you can guide them rather to get to the right answers, or perhaps you can ask questions that will help them think about something in a different way. All of these things come together for brain development.